It's Flashcards Friday here at Math, Science, History. Hi there, I'm Gabrielle Birchak. This month we are starting a summer series about vacations because we all deserve one. Am I right? Today's topic is about ancient vacations. Long before cruise lines, travel rewards programs, or national parks, people were already finding ways to take a break from daily life. So what did vacation look like between 400 BCE and 1000 CE? Was it all chariots and toga parties, or did it resemble our modern idea of leisure more than we think? Let's take a closer look.
But first, a quick word from my advertisers.
Our modern word vacation comes from the Latin term vacare, to be empty or to be free. The concept of taking time off isn't new, it's ancient. And while vacations weren't accessible to the average farmer or laborer, they were very much part of elite and aristocratic life in many ancient cultures. Take the ancient Romans, for example. From around 400 BCE through the early centuries of the Common Era, the Roman elite were very familiar with the idea of getting away. Wealthy senators and aristocrats often owned countryside villas along the coast of Campania, especially near places like Naples, Pompeii, and Herculaneum. Think of it as their Hamptons. These villas weren't just functional, they were luxurious, adorned with fountains, libraries, gardens, and art. Pliny the Younger wrote detailed letters about his seaside villas and even described the feeling of peace he experienced by the sea. His writings are some of our clearest textual evidence that Romans vacationed intentionally to rest, write, reflect, and recharge. But leisure in ancient Rome wasn't always peaceful. Popular vacation destinations included public baths, amphitheaters, or even traveling to religious festivals. In fact, Rome had more public holidays, feriae, than work days at certain points in its history. So for many, a vacation might be a day of games, festivals, and elaborate feasts. Okay, now what about ancient Greece? Well, the Greeks loved their festivals, and they used them as opportunities to travel. Every 4 years, people would travel great distances to attend the Olympic Games in Olympia or to participate in the Panathenaic Festival in Athens. These weren't just sporting events. They were religious, cultural, and social gatherings, and they often lasted for days or even weeks. Traveling to these events wasn't easy, of course. Roads were rough, and bandits were a real concern, but it didn't stop people. Greek writings and inscriptions talk about journeying to Delphi to bathe in sacred springs and ask questions of the oracle. Pilgrimage was a form of travel, one that blurred the lines between devotion and exploration. In fact, some of the earliest travel literature was born from these journeys. Herodotus, often called the father of history, detailed his travels across Egypt and Mesopotamia around 450 BCE. Though not vacations in the modern sense, these travels did reflect curiosity, awe, and wonder, emotions we often associate with sightseeing today. Between 300 and 1000 CE, the Western Roman Empire fell and Europe shifted into what we now call the early Middle Ages. Did vacations vanish? Not exactly. In the Byzantine Empire, which preserved Roman traditions long after the fall of Rome, the wealthy still traveled for pleasure. Constantinople had sprawling bathhouses and coastal retreats where nobles would escape the noise of the city. The emperor himself had summer palaces in places like Chalcedon. Meanwhile, religious pilgrimage grew in importance. In both the Christian and Islamic worlds, pilgrimage routes doubled as early forms of tourism. Christians traveled to Rome, Jerusalem, or Santiago de Compostela. Muslims made the Hajj to Mecca, a practice that began in the 7th century. These weren't beach getaways, but they involved planning, travel, and time away from ordinary life. And let's not forget the Abbasid Caliphate, centered in Baghdad during the 8th and 9th centuries. In this golden age of Islamic civilization, scholars, poets, and nobles traveled between cities like Damascus, Cairo, and Cordoba. Gardens, public libraries, and country estates provided peaceful settings for study, relaxation, and poetry. In the 9th century, Al-Jahiz and Al-Masudi wrote texts describing not only scientific curiosities, but also landscapes and cultures they encountered in their journeys. Of course, we shouldn't assume everyone traveled far. For many, leisure was found in the locale, visiting a river, attending a local fair, or spending time in a rural family home. Seasonal rhythms shaped the pace of life. Planting and harvesting seasons were intense, but they also allowed for pockets of downtime. Even in medieval China during the Tang dynasty, which was roughly between the 7th to 10th centuries, the concept of traveling to scenic or spiritual spots was well known. The poet Du Fu wrote about mountain retreats and the solace he found in nature. The literati class valued excursions to scenic areas, what we might call a nature vacation today. So, did they really vacation? Yes. If we redefine vacation as taking a purposeful break from normal responsibilities, whether to rest, worship, reflect, or celebrate, then people between 400 BCE and 1000 CE absolutely vacationed. The rich had villas, the devout had pilgrimages, and the curious had festivals and poetry. Of course, vacations weren't democratic. They were often a privilege of the elite, but they were valued. Whether in Pliny's Roman villa or a Tang dynasty retreat in the hills, the concept of pausing life to restore oneself is deeply rooted in human history. So, what are 3 key takeaways from today's flashcard episode? 1. The ancient Romans and Greeks did vacation, especially the wealthy, through countryside villas, cultural festivals, and spiritual retreats. 2. Pilgrimage doubled as early tourism, giving people a break from routine and a sense of purpose in their travel. 3. Travel literature and poetic descriptions from writers like Pliny, Du Fu, and Al-Masudi offer insight into how people sought leisure and inspiration far from home. So the next time you book a weekend trip or stare longingly at a travel ad, remember, you're participating in a tradition that's thousands of years old. Ancient people may not have had airplanes or hotels, but the desire to pause, reflect, and explore, that is timeless. Thanks for joining me for this Flashcard Friday. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving a review or sharing it with a friend who's planning a trip. Until next time, take the time to take a break and Carpe diem.